So we started studying the Maimer of the Bar Mitzvah, ITA BEMIDRASH TILIM. So we sent the file last time. I don't know if everybody still has it. We're on the second portion, if I'm not mistaken. We finished the first paragraph of the Ma'amar. We'll briefly go over that. We said that he asked a question at the beginning of the Maimer. He quoted three different Chazal sources, which, as we mentioned, these three sources aren't mentioned in the same place in Chazal, but in light of these three sources, the Rebbe built a logical process that the first Chazal, which he asked this question about, it says that when we put on tefillin, or more precisely, that the Jews have a request, that the Nishmot Yisrael, that our souls request from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we say that we would want to be studying Torah all day long, all day and all night, Yomam V'Layla. And but we don't have time. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu answers, he suggests that since we don't manage to learn Torah all day and all night, we should put on tefillin, and by doing that, it will be considered as if we've been studying Torah all day and all night. And that's the question, that's the general question of this Ma'amar. How can it be that the mitzvah of tefillin, the action of putting on tefillin, would be the same or equivalent of learning Torah all day and all night? In order to answer that, the Rebbe explained something very, very general. Said that all the mitzvahs we do, then as much as we're doing the mitzvah, we are also causing HaKadosh Baruch Hu to do the mitzvah. And that we explained last week. In the beginning of the Maimer, it's mentioned relatively briefly. In the part of the Maimer that we'll study today, B'ezrat Hashem, it'll be elaborated upon. Again, not in the same context, but the concept is explained through what he'll explain right now. The point that he mentioned already in the beginning is, as we explained it, is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has his deeds, Ma'aseh Hashem, his mitzvahs, but they are not actualized until we ourselves do the mitzvah. That way, in a sense, our doing of the mitzvahs is actually causing HaKadosh Baruch Hu to do the mitzvah. And could phrase it that it's what makes HaKadosh Baruch Hu's mitzvahs done. Hashem's mitzvahs aren't done in of themselves. They're not asuya. The word in Hebrew is asiyah. Asiyat ha-mitzvot. So asiyah, which means to do something, but it also means to actualize, to form, there are many words, like every translation, many words to say the same concept in Hebrew. The word is asiyah. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu's deeds, which are like his Ma'aseh Hashem, but his undone deeds. Like he has what he wants to do. And until we are also his deeds. The entire creation is Ma'aseh Yadei Hashem. We are all the actions of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is acting us, he's creating us. So we are his actions. And when our reality reflects HaKadosh Baruch Hu, reflects his will, reflects his mitzvot, then his mitzvot, his own deeds, which is us, become doing, he finds himself doing his mitzvot. But if we ourselves, his actions, don't do his mitzvot, so he's not managing to express himself in his deeds. So in a sense, once we explained that, we mentioned that in a sense, as much as HaKadosh Baruch Hu commands us, and his commandment motivates us to do the mitzvot, we could see the entire doing of the mitzvot the other way around. That we, in our doing of the mitzvot, actualize his commandments. We enable him, we enable his mitzvot, we enable him to do his mitzvot. We are his doings, and if this is what we're doing, then his doings are his mitzvot. But if we're not doing his mitzvot, then his mitzvot aren't being done. So our willingness, our actions of putting on, for instance, like this is true about all the mitzvot. The main example here is tefillin. Our action of putting on tefillin is also causing HaKadosh Baruch Hu to put on tefillin, because we are his actions. So if we put on tefillin, then his actions are putting on tefillin. So he's putting on tefillin. But if we don't put on tefillin, then his actions aren't doing mitzvahs. Then he's not putting on tefillin. So as much as his commandments cause us to do the mitzvot, our actions cause him to do the mitzvot. This is true about all of the mitzvahs. Because this is true about all of the mitzvahs, therefore it's also true about tefillin. And in light of that, the Rabbi, what we just mentioned now was the second source in Chazal. And the third source in Chazal is where Chazal state that nonetheless, even though, as we explained just now, our tefillin and HaKadosh Baruch Hu's tefillin are the same thing, because when we put on tefillin, that is him putting on tefillin. But nonetheless, Chazal say that his tefillin state something different than our tefillin. Our tefillin have 4 statements in them, 4 parshiyot, with the nakuda. The point of our tefillin is Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, that we take a parchment that states the unity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we put it on our heart, we put it on our head. On the same logic of that, Chazal say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu's tefillin, what do they say? If our tefillin say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, what do HaKadosh Baruch Hu's tefillin say? So Chazal say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu's tefillin say Mi K'amcha Yisrael Goy Echad Ba'aretz, a different verse, which complements or mentions the uniqueness of the Jewish people, just like our tefillin are stating the uniqueness, the unity of Hashem. In the same way, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's tefillin is stating or declaring the uniqueness of his people, of Am Yisrael. That's why Chazal say that his tefillin say, Mi K'amcha Yisrael. So in order to explain that HaKadosh Baruch Hu's tefillin, which again are actually our tefillin, say something different than our tefillin. And we explained what we read last week. And that was the beginning of the explanation of the Ma'amar here. We'll go over it B'ezrat Hashem briefly as well. If I'm not mistaken, you can correct me if I'm wrong. If I'm not mistaken, we finished all the way up to Bi'ur Ha'inyan Marat Torah. That's what I recall. This was a couple of weeks ago already, so maybe I'm mistaken. But if I recall correctly, we did finish the first paragraph. So I'm saying it by heart briefly. That again, so that was the logical. Why did he mention this logical sequence? Because this is how he wants to answer his question. His question was, how can tefillin be equivalent to learning Torah all day and all night? And the answer he'll want to say is that what's equivalent between tefillin and Torah is the angle in which our tefillin are HaKadosh Baruch Hu's tefillin. Once you understand that every mitzvah is simultaneously, as much as it's our action, it's HaKadosh Baruch Hu's action, as much as Hashem is causing us to do something, we are causing, per se, him to do something. So once you understand that, then specifically in tefillin, the angle of tefillin being HaKadosh Baruch Hu's tefillin is what is equivalent to Torah. So that's why he had to go through that logical sequence. And if we say this in a more simpler phrasing, what tefillin say to Hashem, what tefillin reflect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is the same thing that Torah reflects to Hashem. And as we'll see in the very end of the Ma'amar, I'm just mentioning it now, is that this is also the difference between tefillin and Torah. That in Torah reflects to Hashem the same thing it reflects to us. It's apparent to us how Hashem sees Torah. But in tefillin, he'll explain at the very end of the Ma'amar that this is really only true about Hashem. That it's only in Hashem's eyes is it equivalent to Torah. But really in our eyes, it's not apparent. That's why it's not as glorious as Torah, as we'll see. But that was just in brackets. So again, that was the point of the logical sequence here. That in order to answer the original question of how tefillin can be equivalent to learning Torah all day and all night, we have to first conceive what tefillin mean to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Since our laying tefillin is causing Hashem to lay tefillin as well, therefore in our mitzvah of tefillin, we also actualize that Hashem's angle on tefillin. And therefore it's equivalent to Torah. But in order to understand why, we have to understand how Hashem sees our tefillin. In order to explain that, how Hashem sees our tefillin, which is again expressed in this statement from Chazal, that Hashem's tefillin say, Mi Kamcha Yisrael. That Hashem's tefillin are a statement, a revelation of his people's uniqueness, of his people's glory. That they bless us, they give us volume, just like our tefillin glorify HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in the same way his tefillin glorify us. And that glorification of the Jewish people is similar to Torah, as we'll see. That also Torah glorifies its studiers. So in order to explain that, last class we studied this paragraph that we're going to go over now. That he says that in general we have to understand, this is one of the most seminal concepts of Chassidus, of Kabbalah, of any in-depth study, any philosophical study of godliness, is that there's an inherent gap of value, like an infinite gap of value between a creation and its creator. That's very simple. That all of creation, it has no value in light of its creator. Hashem creates the world, and but nonetheless, he creates a finite world, and finitude is inherently invaluable to Hashem. Kadosh Baruch Hu is Ein Sof, he is infinite, and therefore any finite creation is like a drop in the sea, or even less. It's just it actually holds no weight. It doesn't exist. It's batel. It's completely irrelevant to Hashem. Therefore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's relationship with his creation, he allegorizes it to someone sleeping. Just like a sleeping person, his actions are non-cognitive. He doesn't put any attention into his actions. While he's sleeping, he scratches his nose. That makes no difference to him because his soul isn't revealed in his body. He's not conscious, and therefore his deeds don't reflect him. And since they don't reflect him, they have no value. We allegorized this last class. We allegorized this to a painter or a creator of some sort. Just like Kadosh Baruch Hu creating the world, we allegorized it to a painter creating a painting. The parchment or obviously is not a complete allegory because in the origin. So creation isn't it's not a separate parchment from Hashem. It is his actions, as we studied when we studied Shari Chuzei Amunah, that the parchment itself is his action. But in order to convey the concept, it's good enough that when a painter paints a painting, so the parchment or the colors have no value, and the entire value of the art that he's forming is in that it reflects him. He has something that he wants to say. He has some statement that he wants to make in his art. And as much as he finds himself in his art, in this art, he paints a painting. And if like we said last week, if at the end you can look at it and say it's a Picasso, you can see the artist in his art. He manages to stamp himself on the paper. Then this painting becomes very, very valuable. It could be worth millions and millions of dollars. Again, not because the stock of the parchment became more valuable. It's not a physical. Still, the parchment it has no value. But as much as it reflects the painter, it becomes valuable to him because he's valuable. He in himself is valuable. And as much as his creation reflects him, he finds value in it. In turn, when he finds value in his creation, then that creation becomes valuable, and as such, it causes, or how would you say, it seduces, it sucks attention from the creator. The artist is sucked into his painting. The more value, the more he finds himself in his painting, the more. Like anything valuable, if you're sleeping or you're not concentrated, but somebody puts a very valuable vase in your hand, then the value of what you're dealing with causes you to wake up. Your attention, your own soul refills your body, and your attention to the art that you're dealing with becomes internal. So that's the exact same thing he said here. That creation in of itself has no value. Finitude has no value. But what do Torah and mitzvahs act in creation? That the more creation is annulled to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the more it reflects His will, reflects Him, the more He sees Himself in creation. In turn, it has value to it. Again, he values it as a reflection of Himself, and not the creation that has inherent value. But if I do a mitzvah, I take parchment and I write tefillin. I take a physical, finite entity, but I form it in a way that reflects HaKadosh Baruch Hu's will. So then there's a reflecting of Hashem in creation. It's like a painter finding himself. He scribbled something on a piece of paper, and suddenly that scribble, he managed to imprint himself, that he sees himself in the scribble. So it becomes valuable. And in turn, he wakes up. As long as creation has no value, then Hashem's attention to creation is like a sleeping person, where his attention is completely strayed away. It's somewhere else. He's zoomed into himself and completely neglected the painting. But once the painting does reflect the painter, then his attention is drawn into the painting. So we were saying that the creation in of itself, and the creation in of itself is something that has no value, being a finite entity that HaKadosh Baruch Hu sustains. Yet when HaKadosh Baruch Hu finds Himself in creation, or that finitude, like the allegory we said from a painter or some sort, that when a piece of parchment manages to reflect me, where I can imprint myself on that parchment, then it becomes valuable. Its reflectance of myself grants it value. And then in turn, that granting of value wakes me up. And this is just important to understand the text here, because there are two things that he's describing as happening. On the one hand, there's creation reflecting Hashem in Torah and mitzvot. When we do Torah and mitzvahs, then there's a reflection of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in His creation. And that in turn draws attention from Hashem. So the allegory he brought for these two states of being were of a sleeping person and an awake person. That when creation is valuable, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu's attention, He's drawn as allegorized to an awake person. Just like a person, when he's awake, his attention to what he's doing, to his actions, he's aware of what he's doing, he values what he's doing, he's involved in what he's doing. Same thing, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when creation reflects Him, when His deeds are something that reflect Him, therefore they're valuable to Him, then He's doing them with His pnimius, he's concentrating what He's doing, he's involved in what He's doing, he's revealed and expressed in what He's doing. But when His actions, creation doesn't reflect Him, so it's like a sleeping person, that there's no attention in his deeds. Not only is there no attention in his deeds, also his body is empty. That's an allegory for Olam Atzilut, that the world of emanation. That's the simple allegory for the world of Atzilut is a body, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's body, Kivyachol. Also, the higher Sfirot are empty of Or and Sof. So it's like a body without a soul. Why? Because the lower creation isn't valuable, and it doesn't draw HaKadosh Baruch Hu's soul into His body. But when creation is valuable, then that causes Hamshachat Or and Sof Be'olam Atzilut. That causes, just like in the allegory, when my actions are valuable to me because they reflect me, then that causes me myself to wake up. My own soul is drawn into my body and revealed within my body. So that was how he described the effect of Torah and mitzvot. The Torah and mitzvot work or cause Hashem to wake up. They draw Hashem's attention into the world, and inevitably his stance, his position in front of the world is that of an awake, interested, involved position. That's what Torah and mitzvot cause. That this effect is called hamshachat or ensof. So this is a very commonly used phrase to explain that by Hashem's action reflecting him, then he himself is drawn, his attention is drawn to his creation, and also within himself, it's as if he wakes up. So he was always creating the world. We mentioned this last week as well, that if Hashem would stop doing, then we wouldn't exist. And like Chazal say, that preceding our creation, HaKadosh Baruch Hu created other worlds which he lost interest in completely. And then it's not called sleeping, they died. That's the phrase used in Kabbalah. That the worlds of tohu, of chaos, they died. What does it mean? Like saying that a painter, he paints something and it really doesn't reflect him at all, and he loses interest in it completely and he stops. That's it, he throws it out. So here, it's not that much. Hashem creates the world. The more it reflects him, the more he's drawn to be involved in his creation. The less it reflects him, the more he's sidetracked, kivyachol. That he's in of himself, he exists in of himself, but his attention towards creation is empty, like hollow. That's another example we gave last week, an example I liked. That when you talk to a person on the phone sometimes, that you can hear that he's concentrating on something else. He's on the computer, he's writing something, he's reading his emails, and he's talking to you, but he's completely not there. You could be saying yes, no, but all of his words are completely hollow. His soul isn't present in his speech. That's like a very good example of what he calls here sleeping. That creation is hollow of Hashem's presence. Why is that the case? Because it's not interesting. If you, like on that phone call, if you start talking about something that's very essentially reflectant of that person's essence, then he'll wake up within himself, and then he'll also talk to you. He'll reveal himself to you from that awake place, and he'll be present in his words. Same thing here. That the more creation reflects Hashem, the more he wakes up towards creation and relates to creation from a present place. Now, this is what's caused by Torah and mitzvot. This is how he explains the verse that he quoted in the beginning of this portion of Ashkifa mimon kodshecha min hashamayim uvarech et amcha Yisrael. That we ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu to view us as we appear through the Torah, through the Shamayim. And when he sees us through the Torah, the way we appear through the Torah, then we ourselves appear valuable. If Hashem views us in of ourselves, it's like saying that if you take a painting and you just see it as parchment, then it has no value. But if you see it as it reflects you, if you're able to see yourself in the parchment, the way it's concocted and organized to reflect you, then it itself is granted infinite value. That's what we ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu to view us as we appear through the Torah. He says the Torah is like a looking glass. That's the allegory he brings, an aspaklaria. Aspaklaria is like a mirror or a microscope or a looking glass. That when you look through this glass, then creation seems valuable. But really, if you look without the glass, without the Torah, then creation has no value. Same thing, when there's Torah and mitzvahs in the world, then Hashem sees creation as something valuable. He sees himself in creation, and therefore creation itself becomes valuable to him. But when there's no Torah, or when he doesn't view creation this way, and then uvarech et amcha Yisrael, when you view us this way, then all of this was mentioned in order to explain the content of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's tefillin. That this is the same content of what Chazal say that his tefillin say. Now we'll understand that what we explained today, in the beginning today. Why, when I put on tefillin, what to me expresses HaKadosh Baruch Hu's unity, that exact same action, that exact same manifestation of a Jew putting on tefillin and expressing Hashem's unity, that exact same manifestation expresses to Hashem my value, exactly as we explained. When I, as a creation, reflect Hashem's unity, then I become valuable to Him. Therefore, when I say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, the Kadosh Baruch Hu simultaneously says Mikam Chai Yisrael Go Echad Ba'aretz, that you're revealing that you're valuable to me because you're revealing my unity in creation. So my revealing of Hashem's unity is a Kadosh Baruch Hu's revealing of my unity. It's the same thing. When we do a mitzvah, then to us the mitzvah expresses Hashem's value, and it makes us valuable to Him. So to Him, the mitzvah is an expression of our value. So this is true about every mitzvah. To be more precise, what we said now is true about every mitzvah. But the phrasing that Chazal used to describe what value precisely does tefillin express, so they say, Mikam Chai Yisrael Goy Echad Ba'aretz. As we mentioned, it's punning off the word Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. It's not just expressing value, it's expressing unity, Hashem's unity. In order to explain that, the Rebbe wants to now start explaining the uniqueness of Torah. He says, at first, up until now, he said that both Torah and mitzvot in general are an expression of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's will. Torah is also a mitzvah. Learning Torah as much, it's also Torah, and there's a mitzvah to learn Torah. So, in of what Torah is a mitzvah, it's a mitzvah like any other mitzvah. And therefore, it's taking creation. Let's try to phrase this as something technical and simple. What are you doing when you do a mitzvah? You take a portion of creation, like a piece of the parchment, and you reform it so that instead of it just expressing itself, it expresses Hashem's will. This is what any mitzvah is. You light Shabbos candles, so there was a piece of wax, and you take this piece of wax, you take this candle, which is a mundane creation reflecting nothing but itself, and therefore has no value in reference to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But when a Jew takes a candle, takes a Shabbos candle, and you act upon it, you form it, you use it in a way that reflects HaKadosh Baruch Hu's will, so much so that when a person sees you lighting Shabbos candles, then he sees a scenario expressing what Hashem wants. The scenario isn't expressing itself anymore. You see a mitzvah being done. You see the presence of Hashem. This becomes like a physical entity reflecting HaKadosh Baruch Hu, just like a piece of parchment reflecting a painter. So that's what every mitzvah is. Any mitzvah you do, you're taking a portion of creation and you're forming it or utilizing it in a way that it reflects HaKadosh Baruch Hu's will, reflects Hashem. And it becomes something that is making godliness apparent. And this, he sees a scenario, like a portion of creation, reflecting not itself, but Hashem's will. Every mitzvah is like this. When you put on tefillin, you show them a Shabbos, any mitzvah you do, you're taking a portion of creation. Either you're taking a physical portion, like the skin of an animal, and you're using it for tefillin, or you're taking a portion of the scenario of creation. You're taking a portion of time, a portion of behavior. You're taking a portion of finitude, of this finite creation, and you're forming it in a way that it reflects HaKadosh Baruch Hu's will. Just like the allegory we said before, that a painter is painting on his parchment, and every piece of the parchment, of the painting that manages to reflect him, becomes valuable. This is true also in the learning of Torah. When a Jew learns Torah, so again, he's taking a portion of time, a portion of his attention, a portion of his effort, of his soul, of his self, and he's utilizing it and forming it in a way that is reflecting what Hashem wants of him. Because Torah is also a mitzvah. But in Torah, there's additional uniqueness than any other mitzvah. Again, every mitzvah is like this. When you learn Torah, there's something in addition to that, as we'll explain now. I'll just say it in a few words that what we're about to read. That Torah, the content of Torah, it's not just forming something. It's not just doing what Hashem wants. Torah itself is a place where HaKadosh Baruch Hu is revealed. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is, as Chazal say, like we'll read in a second inside, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is learning Torah on his own before he created the world. This is what, if we phrase this more correctly, what Torah is a reflection of what Hashem is doing before creation. And when Chazal say that Hashem also learns Torah, what they mean is the other way around. That what was Hashem doing before creation? What interests HaKadosh Baruch Hu? What's he involved in? What's he doing all day before he creates the world? So we don't know. When he creates the world, then this is his doings. This is now his doings. This is his lower doings. What he is, where he's munach, that's the phrase in Hebrew, where he's placed, where his attention is set before creation, we don't know. What's Torah? Torah is a reflection, an appearance of what the Kadosh Baruch Hu is set on, regardless of creation, appearing in creation. So the giving of the Torah is like Kadosh Baruch Hu telling us about his thoughts between himself, within himself. Not what he referred, not his creation of someone else, of us, of creations. No. What he's doing within himself, like Chazal say, the Torah preceded creation. Alpayim shana kadmato ala olam. The Torah precedes creation. What does it mean that it precedes creation? That it's what Hashem is involved in of himself. So this is the content of Torah. When we say that you learn Torah, then also Hashem is learning Torah. It's the opposite. Hashem's learning Torah, and also we learn Torah. We learn Hashem's Torah. So by learning Torah, we're involved in what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is involved in. We involve ourselves in what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is involved in. So he'll explain that. Now, as we'll see, the mitzvahs aren't like that. The mitzvahs didn't precede creation. The mitzvahs are what Hashem wants of creation. It's not something that he's involved in of himself. It's his will from his creation. So the mitzvahs did not precede creation. They didn't exist before Hashem created the world. That's where he set, what he set up. And when I learn Torah in the world, it's revealing, it's not just annulling creation to reflect him, so that it reflects his wills. It's him himself. In many places in Chassidus, the difference between these two things is expressed by the difference between the body and the soul. The body is annulled to me. My healthy body is annulled to me. So I'm speaking, and the movements of my hand and my lips and the sounds that I make express what I think. So I ride, the phrase for this in Kabbalah is a chariot. That my body is like a chariot. That I ride my body. And by riding my body, if everything's working well, then all of my limbs are annulled to me. Chazal say also the mitzvahs are like limbs. Ramach evarim de malka. They're like limbs of a Kadosh Baruch Hu because they're annulled and they express him. But my soul, it's not annulled to me. My soul is me. My soul is an expression of myself. My body is annulled to myself. But my soul is an expression of myself. This is the difference between Torah and mitzvot. Mitzvot are Hashem's will and they're annulled to him. But Torah is Hashem's attention. That's just Hashem's expression of self. It's Hashem expressing himself. So it's like a soul. It's infinitely more united. The phrase is Iyu v'garmo yichad, Iyu v'chayo yichad. That Hashem is one with his lights and he's one with his vessels. But the way he's one with his lights is that his lights are an expression of himself. That's what the phrase light implies, that it's an expression of self. The phrase vessel implies that there's something annulled, something that's annulled to him. So that's why the vessels need rectification. So the body is like vessels. They're annulled to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. The mitzvahs are allegorized to that. But the soul, a Kadosh Baruch Hu's soul, isn't annulled to him. And just like if we allegorize this to ourselves, that our soul, you wouldn't say your soul is annulled to you. Soul is you, it's an expression of yourself, and the unity it's of you and your soul is that you are one. It's not that you're united. You're not uniting with something. You're one thing. This is you. It's an expression of yourself. So as we'll see, this is the difference between Torah and mitzvot. Therefore, this is what he wants to explain. When you study Torah, then you're expressing in the world not just that you're taking creation and annulling it to Hashem, but you're expressing Hashem's self in creation. That creation becomes part of Hashem's self, not just annulled to Hashem, but part of His self. And when I learn Torah, then my attention, my awareness becomes part of Hashem's self. When I do a mitzvah, then my existence is annulled to Hashem. When I learn Torah, I'm part of Hashem's self. Right now we're studying a Maimer, we're studying Chassidus, we're studying Torah, and our attention, our thoughts, our personality is not annulled to Hashem, it's part of Hashem's expression of self. We're part of Hashem's self. When we do mitzvahs, then our existence, our bodies reflect Hashem. We're annulled to Hashem. We're not Hashem. When we learn Torah, our attention, our awareness becomes part of Hashem's revelation of His self. We're part of His self. We're not annulling ourselves. So it's infinitely, infinitely more valuable. That's what he's going to explain. Now, the way he exceeds creation, and mitzvahs don't precede creation. And the mitzvahs exist as part of creation. So much so, like Miriam asked before about that controversial title that we gave the class. Who creates who? Does Hashem create the world, or does the world create Hashem? So that's what he'll explain now. That the midot, the lower 7 attributes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, are, as much as they create reality, reality creates them. What does it mean they creates them? They don't exist until there's a reality. In the world, like the Zohar says about the word Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim v'et haaretz, HaKadosh Baruch Hu creates the heavens and the earth. So about this word Bereshit, Chazal say that the word Bereshit, there's a portion of the Zohar called Tikkunei Zohar. That entire portion of the Zohar is all different words, different ideas on the first word of the Torah. Many, many, many different, very deep, profound ideas, all different ways of reading the word Bereshit. And one of the ways that Chazal read Bereshit is that they split it into 2 words, bara, shit. In Bereshit, HaKadosh Baruch Hu created 6. Bara, shit. Creating the 6. And this is how the Rabbi is going to explain it. We'll read it inside right now. That in creation, as much of creation was created by the 6 lower attributes or 7 lower attributes of Hashem, simultaneously, by creating creation, Hashem also created those attributes. And as much as the creation is a result of the attributes are a result of creation. Exactly the way we explained the doing of the mitzvahs. That as much as our mitzvahs are a result, are caused by Hashem's commandments are only done by our mitzvahs. Our actions do Hashem's commandments. So the mitzvot and the midot are the same thing here. In order to explain it, he gives this allegory from the heart. This is the difference between the mind and the heart. As I'll explain it, the Torah is like a HaKadosh Baruch Hu's mindset. And the mitzvot are a HaKadosh Baruch Hu's relationship to others. Those are his heart, his emotional attributes, the lower 7 attributes. And the klal, the logic in any structure is that the lower 7 attributes are, as much as they create the relationship with someone else, that relationship creates them. They don't have an existence. They lack existence. They lack tangibility. They lack reality prior to creation, as we'll explain it inside here. Okay, so we proceeded a little bit, but we're going to read it from the inside. Now, the words here again are trickier as we go along. This mimer is very, very, every time you learn it, at the beginning is relatively explained, but and also the portion we're going to read now is also relatively explained. But the more you go onward, the more it's very brief. Like he says, very deep things in very short words. So you have to also translating. It's going to be a little bit difficult. So we'll start there studying from inside. It's already late, but because we had such a break in the middle, I hope you can stick around a little bit, and we'll try to read a little bit of the words at least. So he says like this from the portion the mimer that starts bi'ur inyan ma'alat as in opposed to mitzvah. So, like last paragraph, he explained what Torah and mitzvahs do. Like we said, that they reflect Hashem in creation. By doing so, creation becomes valuable and also awakens inevitably attention from Hashem. And now he wants to say that was Torah and mitzvahs. But Torah is unique. What's unique about Torah? ביאור העניין מעט התורה. יובן ממאמר חז"ל 2000 שנה קדמה לתורה. So we'll understand Torah לעולם. We'll understand the uniqueness of Torah by understanding what Chazal mean when they say that the Torah preceded creation. 2,000 years it preceded creation. And the 2,000 years are a reflection of the two sefirot. Chokhmah, Bina. Alefcha Chokhmah, Alefcha Bina. It says each sefirah has 1,000 years. Just like creation, the 6 sefirot, 6,000 years. And the 7th sefirah is Shabbos. And each day of creation is it breaks down to 1,000 years. So when you say that the Torah preceded creation for 2,000 years, it's 2 sefirot over creation. Chokhmah and Bina, it's HaKadosh Baruch Hu's intellect, as I'll explain. So first he says, Perush Kadma, the phrase in Chazal is that the Torah Kadma La'olam. Kadma means preceded. But he says, first of all, the literal meaning of preceded doesn't mean time. It's not a chronological, it doesn't mean something chronological because there is no time before creation. Time itself is a creation, as he states. Time and space are both part of creation. So if you say something preceded creation, it can't be a time span. Before creation, there was no time, therefore nothing can precede creation in time. So the word precede here means that it's something higher. You have to understand preceding as being of a higher level. The Torah is a higher level than again, the word preceding in Chassidut always, in Kabbalah, always means like cause and effect. What's a cause and what's an effect? So it could be simultaneous, but one is the root, one is the cause, and the other is the effect. So the Torah is not affected by creation. Saying the Torah precedes the creation means that Torah is a cause. It's not at all an effect. As we'll see, midot, the 7 lower attributes, they don't precede creation. What does it mean they don't precede creation? Again, it's not a matter of time. It's a matter that as much as they cause creation, they are also affected by creation. They're also caused by creation. So they don't precede. Again, what's preceding is what's a cause. Like in a Seder Ishtal Shalut, the word Ishtal Shalut of the world is like a chain reaction. So the action and the reaction, there's a chain reaction. So what's a higher link on the chain? That's called it's preceding. A preceding. What's a lower link? That's called that it doesn't precede. So saying that that the Torah precedes means that it's a higher link on the chain. It's only a cause. It's not affected by creation at all. Whereas creation, midot, as we'll see, the heart, the lower 7 attributes of the world of emanation, like this portion of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, this portion of godliness, you can't say that it precedes creation. Why? Because as much as it causes, it's also caused, as we'll see, of creation is the Hashem's emotional attributes. Now, in order to study this portion, we're going to have to constantly bounce back and forth from the allegory, the psychological allegory, to the Kabbalistic concept. Just like a person, when I inherently within myself, 10 sefirot, they correspond to a person's mind and heart, the 10 sefirot of the soul, as we've studied this many times. And the simplest way to split them in two, to divide them, categorize them, is to divide between the mind and the heart, the top three, the Gimel Rishonah, the top three emanations, which is Chochmah Bina Da'at, Chabad, or Keter Chochmah Bina, and the lower 7 emanations, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet, Netzach, Yesod, Malchut, the emotional attributes. And why is that the easiest way to split between them? The phrase is commonly used in Kabbalah is two lights, that a person expresses himself in two ways. His mind is Or HaMe'ir Le'atzmo. It's what I shine inwards. It's how I reveal myself to myself. My contemplation, my understanding is my revelation of self to myself. My emotion is how I relate to others. It's how I reveal myself to others. I love you, I fear you, I have compassion for you. And all of my emotional attributes, it's very commonly drawn like a Magen David, that you have two triangles. One triangle is facing inwards, and one triangle is facing outwards. And this is inherently typical of all of the traits of the mind and the heart. So if I'm contemplating in my mind, then not only does someone else not help me, the more I can concentrate within myself and not be bothered by anybody, the more my mind is revealed. But my heart is the exact opposite. If I don't know, if I'm angry and I express my anger, I get even more angry. It refers outwards, my emotional attributes, and the more I express it outwards, that's where it belongs. So that's where it faces. So much so, he'll explain, that the heart doesn't exist without there being someone else, without there being an else, a zulat. How do you say that in English? Someone else, like an archetype of someone else. If there would be no duality, this is like a philosophical meditation that we can't really think about, because we were created into a multiple many creations around us. We can't. It's hard for us to conceive of existential solitude. But if you were to try to contemplate, if there would be no other person in the world, there would be nothing other than yourself, only yourself would exist, then your mind would still exist, even it would exist more. But your heart wouldn't exist. Your all the attributes of your heart, all your emotional, that entire layer of your personality would have no reality. You wouldn't even know what it means. It's very hard to conceive this. You can think that if there's no one now, like the example he'll bring later on, that if there's nobody here that I can feel towards, then my emotions disappear. They don't completely disappear. But if you were to think that if there were no such thing as someone else, then my entire emotional, that entire structure of my soul wouldn't exist. It would have no meaning, I have no reality. I'd have no relation to I wouldn't relate. So that being the case, this is what he wants to say, as much as my emotions drive my relationship with others, I can say it the other way around, that others drive my emotions. As much as I create, as much as my emotional attributes are the root of my relationship is the root of my emotional attributes, because they coexist. If there's no others, then I have no emotion. So even though simply my emotions, I feel I love you, and therefore I relate to you. But as much as that's true, it's also true the other way around. That because I relate to you, therefore I can love you. Because if there would be no relationship with someone else, I'd have no emotions. So as much as my emotions create the relationship, just as much the relationship creates the emotions. Same thing is going to say about all of creation. That this is why when Hashem creates the world, what he's doing is he's creating his own emotional attributes. And this is how the Zohar reads the word Barashit. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the lower six attributes. By creating heavens and earth, he gave volume and reality to his emotions, which Kivyachol didn't exist before. There was no existence to the lower seven attributes before there was a creation, because there was no else. So only by creating someone else, creating creation, did HaKadosh Baruch Hu's emotional attributes themselves become created. Before that, they weren't a reality. So as much as creation is the doing of Hashem's emotion, in the very same way, creation itself does Hashem's emotion. Just like we said about the mitzvahs, that as much as Hashem's commandments cause us to do, our doings cause him to do, cause him to be done. This is all true about the lower seven attributes of the heart. As much as it's true in the heart, it's Hashgacha Pratit. And the example he brings for this is from today's chitas, from yesterday's chitas, from the parsha. The example he brings is from Avram Avinu, that Avram Avinu sits after he circumcises himself, after the Brit Milah, he sits outside the tent and he yearns for guests to come. Chazal say that he's sitting outside and the Hashem brought out the sun so that people wouldn't bother him. But Avram Avinu is not, again, he's not a mindful type. He's not if he were a mindful type, then he'd want no one to ever bother him. Like we said, that the mind exists in of myself. But no, he's an emotional type. He's a ish chesed. He's a heartful guy. And all the volume of his personality are his emotions. So when there's no one to be kind to, then his kindness dissipates. And it's as if he's losing himself. So he yearns for someone else to give reality to his kindness. Because again, as much as when I give someone tzedakah, as much as my chesed caused the action caused my chesed. This is a very, very important concept about the midot. That they don't exist before they're actualized. When you actualize the midot, then also existed. The phrase for this usually in Kabbalah is mitaken. It rectifies, it's built. Your emotional attributes are built by actualizing them. It's like a person can talk to you about how much he wants to give tzedakah, he wants to help people, but it doesn't even exist. It's all delusion. Until he puts his hand in his pocket and pulls out the 100 shekel and gives it to someone, he has no concept of emotion. Like sometimes you meet a person in Shidduchim, it's a good example. And a boy in Shidduchim, he talks to you, he's been in many Shidduchim, he's met many girls, but it doesn't happen. And he talks to you, he said, do you want to get married? He says, yes, betach, I want to get married, I want to give to someone else, I want to take care of someone, I want to have a homestead. But you hear him talking, then you can feel it's all BS, it's all nothing. He has no concept of midas. It's all just mind. It's all theory. There's nothing there. And until he does something, when he decides to do something, then suddenly his own emotional portion becomes a reality. It wasn't a reality before. It was all just part of his mind. It wasn't real. It had no reality. And in order for it to become a reality, it has to manifest. So in creation of heavens and earth, as much as heavens and earth are manifested by Hashem's attributes, they are manifestation of his attributes, they also manifest his attributes. His emotional attributes themselves become manifested by creation. Therefore, you can't say they preceded creation. It's very important. Also in life, this is very important. So a person could be waiting to build his emotional stature in order to get married. You can't do that. Marriage builds your emotional stature. This is what your emotion can't exist without manifesting. So again, it exists hypothetically. There is such a thing as the 7 lower emanations of Atzilut before the creation, but that's called a non-existing existence. It has no reality. It's a non-existence existing. And in order for it to become something real that exists, it needs to create. So therefore, in a sense, creation creates its own source. But the Torah isn't like this. Like, this is all true about the emotional attributes. That they don't precede the world. Like proceeding in a cause and effect manner, you can't say that emotion causes relationship because it's not an intrinsic cause. Because as much as it's a cause, it's also an effect. It's affected by relationship. Relationship causes emotion as much as emotion causes a relationship. But the Torah, the mind is not like that. The mind is not, it's independent of relationship. It's not created, it's not affected. Like I can contemplate within myself. I can theorize without actualizing. Even in a sense, actualizing could bother my theory. If I want to only theorize. So intellect precedes actualization, but emotion does not precede actualization. Very, very important concept. So we'll read this in the words next time. It's 3:00. This is the concept that we need to explain here.